working for the government as a civil servant, you have access to all sort of different job offerings, and you can be a tour guide, or you can be a web designer, or you can be a international relations counselor, or you can be a education specialist, or there are a lot of different fields. And once you're in, you don't need to stay in your field. You can explore other things as well.
Hello, and welcome again to the Pathways podcast, where we explore different careers in the Quebec City region. I'm your host, Susanna Tang, from Voice of English-Speaking Quebec. Today, I'll be speaking with Judy Tweddell about her experience working as a civil servant. Judy has worked for the government of Quebec and in public institutions for almost 20 years. Over that time, she has held many different roles and is presently working for Élections Québec. Did you know that the provincial government is the largest employer in the city? Listen up as Judy explains why you should consider a career in public service. Why don't you, in your own words, explain what your job is?
Well, I currently work at Élections Québec. Élections Québec, of course, is responsible of managing provincial elections as well as referendums. We also have in our role to promote democratic values in the Quebec society. And so I work in a small team. We are 6 democracy education counselor. That's kind of the title that we have. We develop programs and partnership to promote and educate about democracy and the importance of taking that role as a citizen, and of course ultimately promote the importance of voting in all elections. I also work a lot with the communication department to promote our activities, either by going to different conferences and present our project to teachers, or also via social media, of course. And I also work on developing and maintaining partnerships with other organizations that work in the same field. I also get to visit schools and visit different groups to give training sessions.
Can you go into a little more detail about some of the activities you do in the schools?
Yes. We work with students from elementary as well as high school, and then even CEGEP. We have a program called Voters in Training. Is a simulation activity that we hold during the provincial and municipal elections. It's free of charge, of course. We send all of the materials, everything that is used for the simulation. So we send the booths, the ballot boxes, and even the names of the candidates in the electoral district where the school is. So the ballots have all of the real candidates. And then after the election, we post the results online, actual results and the simulation, see if younger generations voted as the rest of the province. There's also another program called Vox Populi, and we help teachers and school principals to implement and work with the student council to make it more part of the decisional structure of the school. Because sometimes student councils are used only to promote the Halloween activities or Christmas activities, but we really want this experience to be an elected member of the student council to become a hands-on approach to democracy.
Judy's work with different schools involves travel across the province. Here, Judy talks about her visit to the lower North Shore. Tell me more about these small remote communities. We don't hear much about it, so...
Well, so they can't drive to one community. All of these communities on the lower North Shore, and it's the same thing in the northern part of the province, there's no roads between the communities. So they either have to there's a ferry that goes from, during the summertime, from one community to the other. And also it leaves from Rimouski, so they cargo a lot of stuff during the summer with this boat. And then you have to use the plane. So it's very costly. So they don't get to visit or even come to Sept-Îles for a sports tournament, for example. They have to charter a whole plane for a team, and that costs a lot of money. So that's one of the issues that the schools were telling us. It's like it's hard to participate in activities and get the kids to participate between different communities because of the lack of access to the transportation means. But they were very involved in their community. They participate in all sort of different activities and programs within their communities, and they're very tightly knit communities.
Next, I want to hear more about how Judy got her start. How did you end up in government? Did you always want to be there?
Well, not really. I never really had a career path or a plan in mind. So one thing led to another. I had a summer job in a ministry. And then I was studying at the time to become a multimedia designer. And then at the end of that program, we had to do an internship. And then I applied for an internship in another ministry. And I ended up working there for a few years after that. And just once you're in the system, there are different opportunities to apply on other postings. And almost 20 years later, I'm still there. But I worked in 5 different ministries or public organizations. It wasn't my career plan. But then again, I find there's something rewarding in the idea that I work for the province and I work for the population and for public services.
One of Judy's past jobs was as a tour guide at the National Assembly. Since tourism is such a vital industry here in Quebec City, I asked Judy to tell us more about that.
Yes, I worked as a tour guide at the National Assembly for almost 8 years. I learned so much by working there, and I met people from across the world. It is a tourist attraction, of course, but it's also where the National Assembly meets. You're really at the heart of all of the decisions that are made for the province. About 70 to 80,000 people visit the Parliament building every year. So those are tourists, as I said, from around the world. And we have a lot of schools that visit as well. So I went back to meeting students, but in a different way, and talking about democracy, but in a different way. So it kind of ties with what I'm doing right now as well.
Now, I guess you must have studied multimedia. Can you talk a little bit about your educational pathway?
Yes. Well, after high school, I wasn't sure where or what I wanted to go. So my English teacher said, well, why don't you go to St. Lawrence? I did all of my elementary and high school studies in French. So she suggested that I just go to St. Lawrence and at least experience school in English. And so I went to St. Lawrence for a year. I studied in language and lit program. So I had English, French, German, and Spanish during the same week. And after a year, I decided to switch programs. And then I went to Cégep Sainte-Foy to study this new technical program called Multimedia Design and Integration. And so I graduated from that and then went to work directly after that. And after a few years of working in the multimedia and web design field, it wasn't exactly what I expected or what I wanted. And I realized that I really wanted to work with people. And that's when I got a job at the National Assembly as a tour guide. And because I'm a very curious person, it sparked my interest in everything that had to do with the work that was being done at the National Assembly. And I always wanted to learn more. And I think it came from the interaction I had with the visitors that we had questions on everything. We had to know everything because people were really sometimes very, very precise on their questions. And then I went to Laval University to study political science. So yeah, it wasn't a straight path.
Did you find the PoliSci degree useful?
But yes, it definitely helps me to understand and to have a broader view of what I want to explain. And of course, I have to adapt it to younger crowds and be comfortable in what I'm teaching them because I understand fully the impact and the decisions and where it comes from as well.
I think it's very clear you have this real enthusiasm for your work. Can you tell us what you love about your job?
I think that meeting people from different environments, from different places around the province and having a chance to work with youth, I think that's what's the most rewarding part of my job. And as I reflected this morning, I was thinking about all the different things I did throughout the government. There's one thread. I always worked in kind of the educational field without being a teacher. Maybe I should have studied to be a teacher, but there's a common thread. And I think that's what I enjoy the most is to share my knowledge and information.
In the following clip, Judy and I discuss youth empowerment and possibility. I feel that the youth of today seem very passionate about different issues such as the environment. Would you agree? Is this maybe a good time to reach out to youth because they are kind of a little more politically aware?
Well, yes, they are. And we've seen different protests last year, for example, regarding environment. And that's what I witnessed because often we hear that youth are not involved, or they're not interested, or they're not interested in politics, and they're not motivated. But in my work, I get to meet kids every day, and I can say that that's not true. When given the chance, they have innovative ideas to solve problems. They are involved. They are empowered. Yeah, so I would agree with you that, but at the same time, what the studies show is that they do not vote as much as the older generations do. So that's why it's important to work with them to also participate in the elections. That's also one way to make policy changes.
So let's take you back to high school now. Can you talk a little bit about your extracurricular activities? Like, what were you involved in when you were younger? Because I think it's important to show how those activities help you develop your skills.
Certainly. Where do I start? I ran for student council a few times. I wasn't elected though, but I did participate in the elections as a radio host because we had a school radio. I worked at the lunchtime school cafe. I was editor-in-chief of the school paper. And I agree that it certainly helped me develop a lot of skills that I use every day in my work, but also it made me understand the importance of being involved in the community and not only criticize. If something didn't work, I would start a group to talk about it or bring it to the attention of the principal. Also, I was pretty shy as a kid, and I think that helped me bring me out of my shell. And now I'm able to give a tour to 100 people and not be shy to talk in front of a class.
So, for our high school listeners, we hope that you'll follow in Judy's footsteps and take part in school clubs and activities. Switching gears, let's find out what is difficult about her job.
The most difficult part of my current job is that sometimes we work on multiple files at the same time with very, very short deadlines, and sometimes being not physically at the office, but on the road. If, for example, I'm spending a week visiting schools. So there's also, I guess, a fear on missing out. We try to seize every opportunity that we have to meet with students. And sometimes it's hard to, even if we want to tackle every project, or I want to tackle every project, that we have to learn to let go and manage stress and priorities. So I think that's really maybe the most difficult part of my job.
And what about English? How often does she use it at work?
I wouldn't say that I use English as often because we work in French, but it is a perk to know both languages. For example, if I'm reading different researches on the education field or on democracy, or if we're watching a clip for a super innovative participation program that's being done in the UK, it's not as easy for some of my colleagues to switch from French to English. Of course, we develop programs for the province, so we also have all of the documentation, all of the activities are in French and in English. And there's not a lot of English-speaking people in the office, so sometimes you become kind of the go-to for proofreading. So that happens. I get to also exchange with colleagues from other provinces through different committees with election agencies. So I do get to use English from time to time.
All right. And now let's get to that question about advice. Do you have some great advice for our high school listeners?
What I would say to the listeners is it's okay to change your mind. I would encourage to experience different jobs, different careers, different interests, to be open to change, to be open to new things, and not to be afraid to pursue them. And you always discover new things along the way, and you can go back to school. So that would be my advice.
Let's finish with this sentence then. So my job is awesome because?
My job is awesome because I get to witness what our society will be in the next generation every day when I meet students, and the future is bright.
And that's all for this episode. Thank you again to our guest, Judy Tweddell, for sharing her experience in public service. We would also like to acknowledge the Government of Canada for funding this initiative. Join us next time for our talk with Kathleen Cameron and Vicky Levesque-Guesquière about the Pharmacy Technical Assistant Program at Eastern Quebec Learning Centre. This is the Pathways Podcast. Signing off. Until next time.